Let me introduce myself. My name is Chris. Today's a very special day for me. I had just left home to obtain my first Pokemon from Professor Oak's laboratory. I came all this way from Celadon City, and I'm well over a day late, but very desperate to start my adventures as a Pokemon trainer. I was just hoping Professor Oak had one monster left. Hurrying into his lab, I spotted a single Pokeball on a dusty table. As I approached hastily, I explained why I was here and begged, "Please, sir, you must let me have that Pokeball there." Oak was quite surprised. He insisted no one had wanted to claim that particular Pokemon before, but I may have it if I would like. Jumping for joy, I took the Pokeball and rushed out to start my training, calling out, "Thank you, Professor, you won't regret this." As I left Oak's lab, he called out some kind of weird warning, but I was too excited to listen. I didn't even know what kind of Pokemon it was that I had just obtained, but I didn't care, as long as I had one.
Finally, someone will let me out. Oh, I've waited for so long.
I assumed it was my new Pokemon speaking. I let it out of the Pokeball to see it was a Charmander. "Who are you?" it asked curiously. "I'm Chris, your new trainer. You're my first Pokemon."
Professor Oak named me Dorothy. He's been caring for me for years now. No one's wanted me as their own Pokemon before.
Dorothy gave me a strangely disturbing smile as she finished her sentence. It made me squirm a bit, but I quickly ignored it and suggested we head out of Pallet Town to begin our journey. Dorothy seemed to like this idea, so we walked through the grassy paths. It wasn't long before we encountered a wild Pokemon, a small Rattata that didn't seem to pose much of a threat. My new Pokemon was a bit afraid, but engaged the mouse and made short work of it with her scratch attack. We continued on our way until we reached Viridian City. By now, Dorothy had leveled up considerably and defeated a slew amount of wild Pokemon, although she needed rest. I took her to the city's Pokemon Center where Nurse Joy gladly healed her wounds and sent us on our way. I began to compliment on how well she's been doing for her first day, but stopped as I glanced and noticed a gloomy look on my Pokemon's face. She seemed distant, bleak. "What's wrong, Dorothy?" The Charmander only shook her head and replied,
I shouldn't have hurt those creatures. It didn't feel right.
"What do you mean?" I asked. Dorothy looked away, muttering.
Nothing.
I decided not to push the issue since Dorothy didn't seem to want to talk about it. During the next few days, I captured a Pidgey and a Nidoran. Since Dorothy didn't want to fight, I let them take her place and leveled up for a while. I liked for all my Pokemon to be around the same levels, with the weaker ones being a bit higher. Things went well for the remainder of the day. As night began to fall, I was almost out of the Viridian Forest, but thought Pewter City could wait until tomorrow. My Pokemon needed rest as it was. We were sitting around a small fire I built, enjoying a snack, but were concerned about Dorothy. She didn't seem hungry and wouldn't sit by us, staring only into the bleak darkness of the night, as if in a trance. I invited her to come join us, but she didn't reply, so I rose to my feet and approached her, extending my invitation again. She only asked,
There's something wrong with me, isn't there?
I shook my head, answering, "You're fine, Dorothy. You just have to adjust to the life of a fighter. You've been cooped up in Professor Oak's lab for way too long." The flame on Dorothy's tail grew as she shouted.
I don't want to fight. It hurts when I harm other Pokemon.
I decided to back off and give her some time to figure this out. Something about her was definitely off, but I wasn't sure what yet. Over time, things about Dorothy only grew stranger. She had random mood swings and an extreme urge to fight. It was during these times I would let her engage in battle, especially since I didn't want her to fall behind the other Pokemon in our team and become weak. After each battle, she would require some time alone to contemplate the fighting, what purpose it had for her. Dorothy seemed to be searching for something deep inside her mind. Whatever it was, I knew there wasn't much I could do to help her. Only time would tell what she was looking for. One night, in Viridian City, my Pokemon and I were relaxing in the hotel after a long day of training. Dorothy was sitting on the balcony outside her room, away from the others. By this time, she would have evolved into a Charmeleon, but Dorothy refused to, insisting she did not want to become more powerful. It was a bit unusual, since most of my other Pokemon were capable of evolving had willingly done so by at least once. I decided to go see what was on Dorothy's mind. During our entire journey, she seemed to have been distant from the rest of us, as though we were worlds apart. It was rather strange for me since she was my very first Pokemon. Opening the door and stepping out next to Dorothy, I greeted her and asked, "Thinking?"
Yes. I believe I'm beginning to understand why I like fighting.
Oh yeah? The calm Pokemon nodded, pondering over confusing thoughts. I looked at Dorothy in confusion, asking, "What are you saying?" Dorothy glanced at me, replying,
I don't like hurting other creatures. But something about the battle feels good. I'm not sure what it is yet. I just feel at peace when it's all over.
She could see I was still very puzzled, looking away grimly and saying,
You'll see someday.
Conversations like this always made me feel uncomfortable around Dorothy, and I began to use her less in battle often. There were times she would ask, even beg to fight, desperate for whatever it was that put her at ease. Her behavior was worrying me. I could tell the urge was beginning to take over her mind, much like a destructive addiction. It wasn't long before Dorothy was reduced to a mindless beast, often frantic and unable to focus. She began to develop a sickly and ill appearance, and was far more distant from the rest of my Pokemon and I. Eventually, I wasn't really sure what to do with the crazed Charmander anymore. She was losing her mind. I did try to store her in a Pokemon Center, but she couldn't bear to be put aside, unable to fight. Dorothy immediately went into a fit of rage when I attempted this, clawing viciously at her own skin and biting her arms, screaming refusals to be stored away. Nurse Joy, despite being quite concerned and frightened by her irrational actions, tended to Dorothy's self-inflicted wounds. She recommended I try to keep her under control and perhaps seek a therapist. On the way down a lonely path of the Pokemon Center, I finally confronted Dorothy about her erratic behavior. "What was all that about? You didn't have to flip out like that back there." Dorothy looked at me in confusion.
I didn't flip out. I was just angry. I need to battle.
"Dorothy, look at the bandages on your arm. You did that to yourself. Why?" I could tell she was growing irritated by my words.
I just want to be able to fight. Why can't you let me have that?
"Because you're becoming a danger to yourself and others."
You don't understand, Chris. You never will until you feel what I feel in the midst of violence. It feels like the greatest rush ever.
I finally discovered what her obsession was when we were at Cinnabar Island. I was tired from all the traveling I had done and didn't have enough strength to deal with Dorothy's stubborn ways. A female trainer passing by noticed my Pokeballs hanging from my belt and challenged us to a battle. I really wasn't in the mood for a fight, and this girl wouldn't take no for an answer. Dorothy clung to my side, begging for the chance to fight. With a heavy sigh, I gave in to a lack of better judgment and let her have first ups, just so she would just quit begging. The girl, a confident brunette, smirked at my small Charmander and answered with a Geodude. I knew this wasn't a good start for me, and decided to replace Dorothy with my Poliwhirl. I commanded her to return, but the Charmander only turned and faced me, looking shocked.
You don't want me anymore. You think I'm too weak to defeat that stone.
That's not it, Dorothy. You just aren't suited for fighting rock-type Pokemon. Dorothy gritted her small teeth, and a small ember on her tail exploded into a rage of blaze of fire.
You can't just toss me aside like garbage.
The opposing trainer grew impatient and shouted for Geodude to use a tackle attack. Too distracted with speaking to me, Dorothy was struck from behind with a blow. It seemed to only irritate her more. This is when things became very strange. In a normal Pokemon battle, it was always turn-based. This was like anything I've ever seen before. It was complete chaos. Dorothy used a well-timed leer to lower Geodude's defense and began to batter the rock Pokemon mercilessly. The brutal attacks were unlike any I had ever seen from such a small Pokemon before. The Geodude could barely defend itself, taking the violent blows until it fainted. But Dorothy didn't stop. She struck the unconscious creature again and again, not holding back. I commanded her to stop and return, but she ignored my words. I rushed up to her, trying to pull the Charmander away, but was sent railing from a hard tail whip to the face, barely avoiding the flame on the tip. The girl trainer, horrified by the brutality of my Charmander, returned her badly hurt Geodude to its Pokeball. She considered fleeing from the fight, but wanted vengeance for her injured Pokemon and summoned a Tentacruel to battle. She pointed at Dorothy and shouted for a Poison Sting attack. I quickly ordered Dorothy to evade the strike. She dodged the Poison Sting, but was caught off guard by a Constrict attack. My Charmander appeared to be smiling, quite wickedly, through the pain as her body was squeezed.
Yes, that's it. Hurt me. Do your worst.
She began to cackle eerily at the Tentacruel. It became afraid and backed off. The girl took her chance despite becoming intimidated, shouting for another Poison Sting. I attempted to tell Dorothy to evade the stinger coming right at her, but she ignored my words, only standing there. The sharp point of the Tentacruel stinger pierced her flesh, expelling blood from the wound. Dorothy cackled more, saying,
What a nice feeling. I'm enjoying this.
The trainer retrieved her Tentacruel, scared by Dorothy's masochist behavior, and ran off. Dorothy looked frustrated. I was shocked, not sure what to say to her. She turned to me with a small splatter of blood on her grinning face.
Now, wasn't that fun?
I began to slowly back away from her. I spent the rest of the day trying to decide what to do with Dorothy. All my other Pokemon were afraid of her. She had become a monster, enjoying the pain she received in battle. There seemed to be no getting through to her, and things only became worse. We had stopped for the night, close by the edge of the island to rest. I dozed off with a few of my Pokemon I decided to leave out of their Pokeballs. I wanted to leave Dorothy in one, but she refused as usual. I slowly stirred the next morning to a strange noise. Rubbing my eyes, I saw that Pidgeotto was fast asleep by me in a small nest she had made. But Dorothy and my Nidorino were missing. Fearing for the worst, I stood and followed the odd sounds. Pushing through some large bushes, I discovered the source by the water surrounding Cinnabar Island. It was Dorothy, biting into my exposed flesh of Nidorino. I was horrified. Nidorino's horn had been broken off, and it was severely injured. Running up to Dorothy, I pushed her off the bleeding Pokemon out of rage. You horrible beast! What have you done? I shouted. Dorothy giggled. Her face and hands were smeared in blood.
I tried my best to show Nidorino how much fun it is. Tried to demonstrate the pain, but he wasn't interested. I kept going until he was half dead. Might have went a bit far, but he'll see I'm right. If he survives.
Clenching my fist, I dropped one of my Pokeballs, releasing my Horsey. For a few long minutes, I struggled to make a choice. To spare Dorothy, or kill her. All I had to do was unleash a well-aimed water gun attack, and the flame of Dorothy's tail would extinguish, killing her instantly. She quickly realized the situation and said,
Go ahead, do it. It will bring the ultimate satisfaction for as long as I'm alive to feel it.
I gritted my teeth, thoughts racing through my mind. Horsey looked ready to attack. The command was on the tip of my tongue. I unclenched my angry fists, becoming relaxed. No, I won't do it. Dorothy's wicked smile crumbled into a disappointed frown.
Fool. You don't have the guts to finish me.
I sent my horsey back into its Pokeball, not noticing Dorothy stepping back, closer to the bank.
But I do,
she said, smiling at me. I gasped and realized what she was about to do, and I rushed to stop her, but it was too late. Dorothy fell off the ground's edge, her grin growing wider. There was a brief but loud hiss as her tail flame was swallowed up by the cool water. I hurried up to the bank to see her laying very still. Her breaths were slow and quiet, she said before her breathing stopped.
Such a wonderful feeling.
The warmth of her eyes faded, and I watched her body gently sink below the surface. After that day, I began torn between feelings about Dorothy's death, whether it was wrong or for the better. For me, that remained a mystery, as well as the origins of her bizarre behavior. I swore to never use a fire-type Pokemon again. It would only remind me of her. That crazed glaze in her eyes, her wicked smile.